Welcome back, everyone. It's time to talk legal technology. And I can think of no better person to bring us to the stage than Niki Black. Niki is the principal legal insight strategist at AffiniPay, which is the parent company of MyCase, LawPay, CasePeer, and DocketWise. Most importantly, she's a lawyer of 30 years, and for 20 of those, she has been writing and speaking on everything legal technology. Welcome, Niki.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here. All right, so I'm going to talk to y'all about generative AI in legal practice for the next 20 minutes, and I'm going to cover ethics. I'm going to talk about some ways that you can use it and emerging trends. So let's see about advancing these slides here. All right. Before I get started, just briefly, I am the principal legal insight strategist, as you just heard, at AffiniPay. The first decade of my career I spent as a litigator. I'm from Rochester, New York, and I started at the Public Defender's Office and was there for a number of years. And from there, I went on to handle civil litigation and continued to handle criminal defense matters. And I've also been of counsel to a DWI defense firm. And then for the last approximately 20 years, I have helped lawyers understand how to use technology in their practices. I have written 2 books. I co-authored Social Media for Lawyers that was published by the ABA, and Cloud Computing for Lawyers that was also published by the ABA. And I also co-authored Criminal Law in New York, a Thomson Reuters treatise. But really, my focus has always been in the intersection of law and tech for the last 20 years. It's one of my favorite things to talk to lawyers about. And of course, with the advent of generative AI and its impact on the practice of law, I've been spending a lot of time talking about that, and it really is one of my favorite things to talk about now. So I'm really excited to talk to y'all about it today. I first want to talk a little bit about the concept of artificial intelligence, just to provide an overview and make sure that we're all on the same page. So let's talk about artificial intelligence. Essentially, it's a constellation of technologies that allows computer systems, gives them the capability to think and perform like human beings. You're going to hear all sorts of discussion about singularity and reaching the point where they outperform humans, but we're just focused on the way things exist now, today. And I've been writing about artificial intelligence for the ABA Journal since I want to say about 2017 is when I first started writing about artificial intelligence software. So I've been covering artificial intelligence's impact on the tools that we use to run our law firms and to practice law for quite a while now. But in 2022, in the fall, that's when generative AI really became a thing that everyone was commonly aware of. It was released by ChatGPT in November of 2022 by OpenAI. GPT 3.5 was released, and along with that, ChatGPT. And since then, ChatGPT has been repeatedly upgraded by OpenAI, and plenty of other generative AI chatbots and tools have been rolled out. But first, let's make sure we're all on the same page about generative AI. What is generative AI? It's a type of artificial intelligence that allows you to input requests in common language, typically text-based, but it can also be voice-based. And then the output is, it generates, hence the name generative, output. And that output can be in many forms, text, video, audio. The most common one for lawyers is text. That's often the output that is the most useful for us in our practices, whether it's practicing law or running your law firm. And there's all sorts of examples of chatbots that are commercially available to consumers generally, and those include ones you've probably already heard of: ChatGPT, Claude, Google Gemini. And then there are legal-specific tools which are increasingly rolling out. Co-Counsel by CaseText was acquired by Thomson Reuters is one of those examples. So is LawDroid. And since the beginning of last year, legal tech companies have been rolling generative AI functionality out into their platforms and continually upgrading it and adding new features. So you're often going to discover that the tools that your firm is already using may have generative AI features. And we'll talk a little bit more about that and why legal-specific tools are probably something you're going to want to prefer to use for most use cases in your practice rather than the more commercially available ones like ChatGPT or Anthropic's Claude. Why does artificial intelligence matter? It does matter. And the reason that it matters is because it is as fundamental as the microprocessor. This is a quote from Bill Gates. Essentially, there's a shorter quote that really resonates with me that he has said as well, which is that essentially it was the internet, PCs, and then what we're at now, which is generative AI. And I think that that's a really important thing to think about because much of my legal tech career has been focused on everything that came between the internet and generative AI, helping lawyers understand why it was important to understand social media, even if they didn't plan to use it to market their practices or or for other professional purposes, and helping them understand the value of cloud computing and why they needed to start learning about it and incorporating it into their firms, and mobile devices and mobile computing. These are all things that were pivotal and had significant impact on the practice of law, but none nearly so much as what I agree with Bill Gates, PCs, the internet, and then generative AI. These are truly transformational technologies, and I don't use that term lightly. And generative AI really is has I wouldn't even say the potential. It is a disruptive technology at this point that is impacting the way that we obtain information and the way that we create and use this tool, the way that we create documents and learn about things and share that information with people. So it really is this transformational shift. And but as with every technology, because we are a profession that is a regulated profession, a profession where we have ethical obligations that we have to adhere to, it is incredibly important to understand the pitfalls and the risks along with the benefits of using technology. And so I first want to go over some of the pitfalls and things that you really need to think about when you use generative AI in your practice. And I would preface this by saying one of your ethical obligations is technology competence, right? In 2012, I may have that date incorrect now that I'm thinking. I think it's 2012 is when the might be 2017. I usually know this off the top of my head. In any event, a couple of years ago, the ABA amended Model Rule 1.1, the comments to it, to indicate that your competence obligations include technology competence. And that means that you need to understand technology and make educated decisions about whether to use or not use it in your practice, and you need to stay abreast of technology changes. And so obviously, AI and generative AI are incorporated in that obligation. And so it's incredibly important to understand generative AI, even if you're not choosing to use it right now in your practice. So I cannot stress that enough, and that's why it's important to be listening to a CLE like this one today. First of all, there are a number of different things you need to think of aside from just being competent in the tech and understanding it and understanding how it works. You need to also, when you use generative AI, you need to understand how to protect your client's confidentiality. And with every type of technology or anytime you outsource the maintenance or handling of confidential client data to third parties, there are things that you need to think about, and you need to vet the providers that are going to be handling the confidential data. So with confidentiality, you need to first understand what data is actually confidential, and then you need to vet the providers. You need to ask the providers the who, what, when, where, why, and how of how they handle your law firm's information and that confidential client data. So that means you need to understand whether it's generative AI or not, because generative AI is in the cloud. So you need to understand the same things you need to understand with any cloud provider, the encryption levels, whether it's encrypted at rest and encrypted at in transit. You need to understand under what circumstances will employees have access to your firm's data, and the types of permissions they might need to do that. You need to understand the service level agreements that you sign with them and what they talk about in terms of security. You need to understand security levels. Is it bank grade security? You need to understand Where the data is located. Is it housed in geo-redundant servers? There's all sorts of things so that if one server goes down due to a natural disaster, there's another one with a backed up copy of your law firm's data. These are all things you need to generally vet a provider about anytime your data is in the cloud. But there are additional confidentiality concerns with generative AI because it is unique. In order for these chat bot tools to be useful that use generative AI, they have to have been trained on data that makes them valuable. And most of them have been trained on the entire internet, but they also often want to take any input that you provide them to continue to train these models to make their output even better. As an attorney, when you're using the generally available tools like ChatGPT or Claude, you need to turn off that. You need to at least pay, if you're going to input confidential data into these tools, you need to turn off that. You need to go into the settings and turn off the learning, the sharing with the model. And ideally, you subscribe to a level where you have absolute control over how they handle your data. And that's why legal specific tools are often more preferred. More often than not, they're going to be a provider that you're already working with. You trust them to handle your law firm's data, and they can take your law firm's information and house it. Your law firm's information is separate from all other firms. It's in its own environment on that cloud provider's server, and it protects it from any kind of intermingling with other data, and it prevents it from being shared externally as well. So when you use legal specific providers, they are able to provide you, they should be, you need to make sure, with that type of computing environment. And you also need to understand how they handle your law firm's data across the board. And one thing that's nice about the legal specific providers is that they understand your ethics and your confidentiality obligations because they serve the legal market. So there really are a ton of different issues just relating to confidentiality that you need to be aware of. There are supervisory issues, right? You have obligations to ensure that everyone in your firm is trained on how to use artificial intelligence. You need to make sure that everybody in your firm also understands how to use these tools properly, what rules that you have in place about using them within your firm, which tools they're allowed to use. And then you need to carefully review any output that is provided to you as an attorney to review before it's submitted to the court. There are all sorts of issues that relate to complying with, candor with the court and complying with court orders that may require you to disclose the use of artificial intelligence. You have a basic competence. I wouldn't even say it's tech competence. You have a basic competence obligation to review any type of pleading before you submit it to the court, any type of memo before you submit it to the court. You need to review those citations. You need to ensure that they're accurate. You need to ensure that the underlying cases that the cases that are cited, that those cases themselves stand for the proposition that they are indicated that the document indicates that they stand for. And that's just basic competence. So all of these headlines that you see about the hallucinations, that people use these fake cases, and this seems to be sometimes blamed on the artificial intelligence. Yes, sometimes artificial intelligence hallucinates, even the legal specific tools, but that doesn't matter. No matter what happens, before you submit something to the court, you need to read those cases. You need to review the citations to make sure that they're accurate and refer to real cases. Even if an associate were to provide you with a memo that they wrote, you would still have to read the memo. You would still have to look at the citations. You still have to read the underlying cases to make sure that they're accurately cited to. So those are just basic competence issues. And I would argue that all of those headlines are exposing underlying competence issues, sort of the ugly underbelly of law practice that's been going on for a really long time versus actual competence issues related to technology. The technology is not the problem. It's the attorney that's the problem. You have to understand that it does hallucinate sometimes and review it carefully before you submit it to the court. There are also all sorts of biases issues that are incredibly important that you need to be aware of. If you ask it to provide any commercially available tool to provide it with you a picture of a lawyer, it's going to provide you with a picture of a male lawyer, almost inevitably a white male lawyer. So you need to understand that there are all sorts of biases that are built into these tools for any number of reasons, and you need to be aware of that and screen the output accordingly. And the other problem is that it's in its infancy. It's improving every day, honestly, at an exponential rate. So you really need to stay on top of all of these changes. And it's really important to attend CLEs like this one. I do have a link at the very top There was a list of clouds from my cloud computing book that was published in 2012 that I've updated periodically over the years to vet cloud computing providers that I've published online. And with the rollout of generative AI a couple of years ago, I also added a secondary list after that that has questions specifically asked artificial intelligence providers. So if you go to that link, you can find both of those lists. I also want to talk to you about some data about artificial intelligence. I oversee and write the legal industry report for FinaPay. It's a survey. It surveys over this year 2,800 legal professionals, and we asked them about a host of different issues. One of them is generative artificial intelligence use and plans for using it in their firms. We also ask about different ways they're using different types of software and the benefits and their concerns about using that software. We ask about remote work. We asked about hybrid work and how law firms are working. And I authored this report. And so this data is all from this year's report, the 2025 FinaPay Legal Industry Report. And when we asked about artificial intelligence, we learned that 43% prioritized integration with trusted software providers. And you can see a list of reasons for that prioritization there on the right. What I often recommend when people are thinking about using artificial intelligence is, try out ChatGPT. Don't input confidential information, but give it a try. See what it can do for you. And then before you start coming up with plans to purchase artificial intelligence software, especially legal specific, talk to the companies you're already working with, the legal providers that your firm's already trusts, and find out what their plans are, or have they already rolled some out and that you missed some of these features, and what does their roadmap look like? Because it's entirely possible that they're going to roll out functionality that you need and you're already paying for it through a trusted provider that you regularly use. So with all these, and just to highlight the different legal ethical issues, there's the duty of tech competence, the duty of candor to the tribunal, duty to supervise the output and also your employees as they use it. With billing, another topic that comes up often in the opinions is reasonable fees. It's a lot like legal research. You can't charge them for the time you would have saved had you not used it, for how much it would have taken you if you hadn't used this tool. You can only charge them for the amount of time that was used to create queries and to analyze the output, not the time that you saved. And there's some additional, depending on your jurisdiction, they opine in different ways on different issues related to billing. And disclosure of use to clients and courts. Clients, the opinions they sort of vary, and it comes down differently depending on the jurisdiction. Some of them will require you to disclose it to clients. And with courts, you really need to be aware of the specific court rules of each court in which you're practicing. And then just some of the examples of when generative AI, the headlines that make people so reticent to use it. There are plenty of situations, and they continue to happen, where lawyers submit pleadings to the court or memorandums to the court that have false case citations in them. Don't be one of those lawyers. Review all the output of every single submission to the court, regardless of who's created it. Honestly, review your own wait a day and review the documentation that you've created, the pleadings that you've created. Give yourself a day's space just to look over it with a fresh eye, like you do with any writing. And when someone else has drafted it, regardless of how they've drafted it, you do the same thing. And with generative AI, make sure to review all of it, because you have to. And then let's talk about, in this last section here, how can lawyers use generative AI? There's a lot of ways that they can use it. Right now on LinkedIn, if you follow me on LinkedIn, I'm going through, I spoke at ABA Tech Show a couple weeks ago, and my co-speaker and I had listed 60 use cases in 60 minutes, and I'm sharing on LinkedIn 5 of those use cases along with the suggested prompts that we came up with. Every few days I share 5 of those, but I'm going to go through quickly some of those options, because generative AI truly can impact not just how you practice, but how you run your law firm. There are so many ways that you can do this. The survey, the industry report showed that lawyers are increasingly using these tools, and law firms are increasingly slowly, but they are increasingly researching how to use these tools, especially legal specific ones, and that people that do invest in these tools and start using them see increasing significant time savings and an increase in efficiency. So if you learn how to use these tools, you really can see the benefit. we asked lawyers how are they using them, and these are an assortment of different tasks that they were using them for, pulled from this year's report. And it changed a little bit from last year because people are starting to use it for stuff that includes confidential information, especially when they're using legal specific ones. They're also using them to run their law firms, not just to practice law. And this is just a highlight of some of the different ways that they're using generative AI. And then I'm just going to quickly go through a number of different ways that you can use it. You can document creation, revision, and summary. Fantastic use case to work with documents. You can use it for an idea generator, an educator, and for a writing assistant. You can summarize legal concepts. You can, and this is all just using ChatGPT or general use tools, not necessarily legal specific. You can ask it to summarize, sui generis. What does that mean? You can ask it to summarize a case. So pull a case from online, an actual case, and upload the PDF, and it can summarize it for you as a starting point to help you wrap your mind around a case, a lot like head notes do, so that you can then dive into the case and analyze it better. You can use it to summarize transcripts. You would probably want a legal specific tool for this because there's often some confidential information, and also the legal specific tools. ClearBrief is an example where you can do deep dives and Q&A the transcripts, or even entire trial notebooks, so that you can basically Q&A the data and get specific answers about conflicts in the data, for example. It's great for ideas for direct or cross-examination, not to draft your entire direct or cross. But if you want to think of a brainstorm, different ways to approach a challenging issue on cross or on direct, cross is particularly useful. It's really useful for that because it can help you think out of the box and come up with unusual ways of kind of honing in on a specific point that you might not have otherwise thought of, that you can then use as a jumping off point to create your cross. Same for voir dire. It's great to come up with interesting ways of introducing an idea to a jury that supports your client's case. And I actually know a public defender whose colleague did this for a murder case in New York, and it helped them come up, a seasoned attorney helped them come up with some ways of approaching it that they'd never thought of before, and they got a not guilty verdict. Certainly not just because of the voir dire, but we all know it doesn't help to pull a jury that listens to what you're saying. And there's a lot of other ways you can use it to run your firm, using law practice management software, legal billing, litigation analytics, legal research, document management, e-discovery. All of these legal specific tools, doesn't matter what you're using, I can almost guarantee that they are either rolling some generative AI functionality out into their platforms, or else they have plans to do so. So you absolutely should check with your provider. And I'll just go back real quickly, and then I'll close this out. But find out if your law practice management software has rolled it out and what their plans are, because it can absolutely, law practice management software and legal billing software are fantastic ways to use generative AI because it has all of your law firm's data upon which you can Q&A. So, and same with document management software. So instead of sticking your head in someone's office, didn't we have a case where we wrote a memorandum of law on this specific use case, this specific issue? I can't remember what the case was called. And they're like, yeah, I know I did. I can't remember the name of the case. So they ask someone else, or their secretary, or someone else, or their paralegal. Instead, you can Q&A the software, and it can pull it up for you. You can find out how sort of switch to flat fee billing by querying all the different times you've handled a specific type of matter, how long it's taken to get to conclusion, how much you've charged with hourly billing, what the profit looked like. And then you can have it help you predict, as this software gets more sophisticated, help you predict a reasonable flat fee that's both competitive to undercut your competitors, but will ensure profit. There are a ton of different ways you can use these tools. And as these providers dive more in and build this functionality out in ways that their customers are requesting, you're going to find it becomes increasingly useful. And it provides a user-friendly interface that makes it so much easier to access this information and practice law and run your law firm. It's going to change the practice of law, whether it's legal research, contract analysis, or data analytics. There are so many ways to use these tools to do these things. You can analyze contracts side by side, see how the red lines compare. There are tools that do deep dives into this that are legal specific that are incredibly valuable. I write about different types of tools in my ABA journal column. So if you're ever looking for a specific category of generative AI software, I can guarantee I've probably written about it. And you can go look at that column. It's a monthly column, and locate where I've written about this particular software that you may be interested in. Litigation analysis helps you decide where to file a case based upon how different judges in that particular circuit have responded to certain issues, how to plead a specific issue in front of a judge so that to raise it in a memorandum that and that the judges looked upon more favorably than other ways of doing this. It can help you analyze expert witnesses, analyze opposing counsel, analyze companies. There's so many ways of using these legal specific tools to analyze litigation information that can help you make better decisions. Document management, I touched on some of those, but you can Q&A all of your law firm's documents. And legal research. This is one of the most advanced ways of using it right now. They've invested in it since the beginning. A lot of these large companies, VLEX, Westlaw, Lexis Plus AI, they've all rolled out functionality, generative AI chatbots that allow you to access information across all of these tools. It's expensive, but it can be really valuable. E-discovery, the e-discovery companies are all in. I was just at Legal Week earlier this year, where they're all talking about all the generative AI functionality that they've rolled out. These companies are all in and rolling these tools out in their software. Are robots going to replace lawyers? I know Mark and I are going to talk about that in a few minutes. I would say that no, they're not going to. They are going to replace functions that you find mundane and boring. They're going to make it, they're going to replace some legal functions, though. I think you're going to, just like e-discovery software, reduce the number of lawyers that they needed to review discovery in these large litigation matters. It's going to replace some functions, and over time, it's going to be interesting to see what that looks like. But it's not going to replace all lawyers. I just don't think that's entirely possible. It's not realistic. So the future is now. You need to learn about it. I can't emphasize this enough. And if you don't learn about it now, you're going to get left behind, because this is advancing so much more quickly than any other type of technology that we've ever seen. So it's great that you're here. It's great that you're interested. And you truly do need to dive into all of this and learn about it.